Asmita, can we start the session? Students will be joining in the meantime. We
Okay,
should
ma'am.
not keep the guests
Sure.
waiting.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes.
Pragya?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pragya Datta, and I'm pleased to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished guests, Ms. Pauline Okeyo and Dr. Michael Gould, to today's webinar, which states From Academic to Industry, Preparing the Next Generation of Geoinformatics. On behalf of Symbiosis Institute of Geoinformatics, I welcome you all. Your presence enriches our discussions today, and we look forward to your valuable insights. I would also like to extend a hearty welcome to Bhakti Tithe ma'am, our esteemed placement officer, whose guidance is invaluable to our students' professional journey. A special welcome to all the attendees joining us in this virtual meeting. Without further ado, I would like to invite Bhakti ma'am to share her thoughts and kickstart today's engaging session. Thank you.
Just give me a moment, please. One second. I just lost the connection. I am really thankful to Madam Pauline and Sir Michael to join this session, and we are looking forward to have some insights from you both. Now, I request someone to do the introduction, and we can we can start off the session with someone. In fact, on a weekday, that too with your running schedule, I'm really glad that you have made time to interact with these students. And I'm sure it is going to be an interactive session. Sir, I would like to ask you, would you like the question answers to be after the session or in the mid when they have the doubts?
I think it can be during. Perhaps if people are typing questions into a chat window or something, then we can have a look. And whenever you think there are some good questions, you can throw them our way. That would be good.
Certainly, certainly. Then we definitely would like to encourage students. If you have any questions, please type it in the chat box so that they can answer the questions. Be patient enough that the questions will be answered as in when they'll see the chats and all. Yes, I pass it on to Pragya. Please do the introduction part.
Yes, ma'am. Moving on to the introduction part, I would like to welcome Dr. Michael Gould, a professor of information systems since 1997 at the University Jaime I in Spain, and since 2009, who has also been the global education manager at ESRI. In that capacity, he works with ESRI's 85 regional offices to reach out to more than 10,000 universities and support global capacity development projects. His academic background traces back to the University of Massachusetts, where he has completed his bachelor's in geography and cartography. His doctorate degree is from the University of Buffalo. Welcome, Dr. Michael. We are delighted to have you among us.
Thank you very
Our
much.
second guest is an alumni of the University of Nairobi. Her background consists of a bachelor's degree in geography, a minor in political science and public administration, along with a master's degree in geographic information systems. A GIS professional with over 10 years of experience, currently working for ESRI as Senior Solution Engineer Africa, where she supports Pan-African organizations, regional partners, and international organizations working in Africa and using ESRI's solution to achieve sustainable development in Africa. Prior to joining ESRI, she worked for ESRI Eastern Africa as the Professional Services Manager responsible for the development and implementation of the training and services portfolio in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ethiopia, and for the Kenya Wildlife Service, before that as an area GIS assistant supporting conservation activities in the Western Conservation Area. With this, I welcome Ms. Pauline Okeyo.
I forgot to mention, there's one good thing about Madam, that she has been passionate about the career development activities for the young professionals like ours. And she definitely keeps supporting these young professionals, the budding GIS analysts, by, arranging different internship activities for the students, some mentorship programs and technical meetups also. So definitely on this part, we can engage later on, ma'am. I'll speak to you about this in detail. Definitely over to you, and you can take the session with your ways. And ma'am, thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder if maybe you can say a few words about the students who might be online. Is it mostly geoinformatics people, geographers, a mix? Maybe tell us a little bit more about the audience.
Right. We have it's a mix. There are students who are studying MSc in geoinformatics. We have students who are studying MTech in geoinformatics. Now, these are the students who have completed the first 2 semesters and they are about to start with the third semester, and that's when their placement season normally starts. They'll be very soon. The first company that will be coming is yours, which is Esri India. So they'll be very soon, facing the interviews and all. So this is a preparatory kind of time when we are preparing them for the upcoming placement season also.
Excellent. Very good to hear. Thank you for that context.
Thank you.
That's what I expected, but I just was curious if we had other people coming in. What we're finding is that increasingly GIS is being spread across university campuses. And so, of course, we expect geoinformatics people and geographers to be involved. But every once in a while, we're surprised and we have people coming to visit these kinds of webinars from public health or from engineering, from business schools. And so that's very encouraging to us to see the GIS is reaching out to many, many more faculties.
Right.
Okay, super. So as a quick introduction, I think you already know our company, Esri, but let me give you just a bit of context because our company is a special company. We're not a startup company with a few people with a lot of startup capital doing kind of crazy fast things. We are more a mature technology company. We've been around since 1969. And we have grown organically, which means that our founder, Jack Benjamin, he started with just a small amount of money from his parents, and he built the company organically based upon real users and real projects. So no investment bankers and no kind of crazy financial speculation. It was all built kind of brick by brick over these years. And so that makes us a very special company. Also, we're still privately owned. And so again, we don't have banks and shareholders breathing down our necks telling us how much money we need to make in the next quarter, right? It allows us to take a long view and to develop what we think are the right GIS tools for our users. And so it's a very interesting company to work for, and that's the case for Esri India as well. So as was mentioned, my role is I work kind of connecting more than 10,000 universities that are using our software with the industries that are also utilizing Esri software. And so here's our industry page. And I think this is a really good page for people to visit. It's mostly US centric, but there are some international examples here as well. But this gives you an idea of all the different sectors or the segments within society they're utilizing ArcGIS to do their jobs. And so here we've got this giant list of basically links into specific worlds. So what is the petroleum industry doing with ArcGIS, or nonprofit organizations, or natural resources, mining, agriculture, renewables, public safety, scientists, telecommunications, state and local government, business, conservation. And so if I just click on any one of these, for example, AEC, architecture, engineering, and construction, this is a huge area for us, and there's a lot of growth. Everything that's being constructed these days is being constructed based on a 3D model, or sort of a representation of the real bridge or the real library or the real city. And so we're building digital twins of these large construction projects. And so here, this is just one example of one of these sites that you could go to learn about what the AEC industry is doing to create digital twins, to do what's called reality mapping, which involves things like flying drones around the buildings and collecting and creating models in 3D, and then connecting sensors to our buildings and have everything connected in real time. So there's some really interesting things going on in each one of these industries. And so what's interesting for me is to try to connect each department and faculty within every university around the world to these industries. And we want people to have a better understanding about what are people doing with our software in these different industries. So it's not necessarily the case that everyone who studies GIS is going to go and work for a city government making maps. We also have people who are doing really interesting things in the marketing department of a bank, or working for Starbucks to determine where to locate the new coffee shop. Or there's a long list of commercial and nonprofit and development activities that are going on around the world. So that's really interesting for us. And if you have questions regarding any of these industries, please let us know. We can maybe say a few words about what they're doing. So connecting the industries, which are all these hundreds of thousands of users out there doing interesting things with GIS, we have Esri Careers. And so if you search for the esri.com career webpage, you can learn more about the company and the environment, the working environment at Esri, and the different types of activities that we're involved in. And you can search for jobs. There's a student program section as well, which includes internships. So we have a 12-week internship program. These interns are starting now in the California office and some of the other regional offices around the world. And the students are selected based upon their area of interest and their experience, and then based upon which of our managers at the company need an intern. And so we as managers, we would apply for an intern internally within Esri. We would say, I need a JavaScript programmer to help me to build some kind of an app. And then we'll look through the thousands of candidates for interns. And then the HR, the Human Resources Department, will send me, for example, a list of, here are 5 shortlisted candidates. Here are people who meet your requirements. So then we try to figure out who's the best person to come and work in the summer for us. And the interns would normally come and work with us, sometimes online, for 12 weeks, and then go to the user conference oftentimes in San Diego. So that's very interesting. But in terms of jobs, we're a pretty large company. We're not as large as Microsoft, but we've got thousands of employees. And so we have hundreds of jobs that are open at any one point in time. And we can search for types of jobs, and we can search by locations. And so, for example, we have lots of different jobs available in different locations, different roles. So let's see, if I search for solution engineer, and Pauline can say more about this in just a minute. So here's a bunch of opportunities for so-called solution engineers. And these are people like Pauline who are working directly with the customers to help build things, to prepare demonstrations for important sales engagements, sometimes to help out with some of our training activities. And so Pauline can say more about that. But I can see here there's 157 of those openings in various offices around the world. And here I can see there are different offices. We have not only traditional Esri offices, but we have research and development centers around the world. One of them is in Delhi, and that's where we do a lot of our geo AI research. We have one in Sharjah also, and we have one in Dubai and in Vienna, Austria, and lots of other places. So if I take a look here, I thought I just saw, here we go, in the New Delhi R&D Center, we've got, I think, well, maybe not a solution engineer, but if we keep that open, I think we've got a few available positions there if it wants to cooperate. There we go. So we're looking for some product engineers and some people to help out with sales and some other things. Lots of different opportunities in different offices. I thought I had selected just R&D. There we go. So basically at the R&D office in New Delhi, we have a lot of people working on AI. So people who have experience with artificial intelligence, natural language processing, classification of imagery, utilizing deep learning and that sort of thing. That's where we're building a lot of our geo AI solutions. So that should be interesting for you to know that a lot of our development is not happening at the home office in California. It's happening in different places around the world. And we've got a team in Beijing creating mobile applications, and the team in New Delhi creating AI applications, and the people in Vienna, Austria, creating indoor mapping applications. And so there's a mix of R&D activities that are happening around the world. And so this is something I think for you to think about regarding our company, regarding in comparison with a startup company. A small startup company might be interesting and kind of an interesting challenge to jump into. If you create your own startup company, you usually have two kinds of profiles that you're hiring. You want people to build your product and you want people to sell your product. So when you're starting out, you don't have a lot of funding to fund some of these sort of extra types of careers. So you start off building a product and selling a product. But then when your company starts to mature, as ours has, then you have to start providing training and customer service and lots of other types of marketing activities. And the company starts growing and maturing, and you start having lots and lots of different of job profiles. And that's certainly the case for our company. So it's not the case that everyone needs to either develop ArcGIS software or sell ArcGIS software. There are lots of people like myself in the middle, like Pauline in the middle, who are helping customers to be successful in connecting people and working on events and working on training materials. We have lots of trainers who are teaching people around the world. So there's lots of interesting stuff happening. Pauline, do you want to jump in and say a few things about your role as a solution engineer and some of the things that you and your colleagues are doing in the Dubai office?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So from what Mike has shown, we support a lot of engagements by enabling users or people who are interested in using ArcGIS to be able to make full use of its potential. So it could be generic, which you'll find in most cases people with a similar background to yours in terms of what you've studied for your undergrad or your master's. You'd fulfill such a role in that you have enough knowledge and skills to be able to support engagements with anyone you come across who's interested in making use of GIS. But you'll also find cases where added industry knowledge or experience is needed to be able to support customers around that. One of those examples is what Mike had shown. Like we support the AEC industry, that's architecture, engineering, and construction, and we have a lot of innovation going towards that side, given the advances in hardware, in processing power, and so on, to be able to work with GeoBeam or with beam data within the geographic context. So you'll find there's a growing need on that aspect because we want to visualize this information, we want to work with it in 3D, and there's a lot of projects right now that are developing a need to have this available to them in a geographic context. So you'll find in that example or cases such as other industries where having a bit of industry knowledge is necessary to be able to fulfill a particular role. And even further to that, you'll find that those roles, they would specifically look for someone who has studied GIS, like saying, oh, we need someone who has a master's in GIS or something like that. They might have like an overall vacancy announcement. Then as you go through, that's where you can see how this added skill you have, how it has, it will provide the necessary insights they will need in the organization to be able to get an understanding of their data and how an understanding of their project or their data and how it interacts with the rest of what is around them or the environment. Yeah. So as an SE or as a solution engineer, we are quite many in Esri. We are distributed globally. And even beyond Esri itself, we also have solution engineers available through our partners who are also available globally, providing hands-on technical support in enabling users to take advantage of, what we have as part of ArcGIS. Yeah.
Excellent. So I think some interesting points there. One point is that she mentioned BIM, right? Maybe not everyone's familiar with BIM, building information models, right? So the AEC community, the architects and the designers of, let's say, a shopping center or an airport, they would oftentimes these days create a sort of a digital model of this large infrastructure. And they would be utilizing, let's say, Autodesk products, and they would be creating a building information model. So they would have attributes, or they would have sensors connected to every particular pane of glass regarding the windows of the airport, and they would have connections to all the lights and all the air conditioning and all the sort of the assets within one of these large installations. And this would all be sort of modeled digitally, but also controlled digitally. And then someone needs to connect that to the traditional GIS. So this is something which is really interesting for us these days, is that a lot of our projects are not traditional GIS. It's connecting GIS to something else, to a bridge management system, or to an airport management system, or to a security system, or to some sort of other exterior information system. And that's really interesting for us, because we can be the spatial or the geospatial experts who can provide just enough GIS functionality to be able to make their larger system more efficient. And that's really interesting. Another thing that she talked about is, I'm forgetting now. The global nature and the diverse nature of the kinds of projects. So I think Pauline can say better than I that, you know, no two projects are ever the same, right? There's always something new coming at the solutions engineers. There's a lot of opportunity to meet new people in new fields of work, and to be able to figure out what's the right mix of GIS and these other information systems for them to be able to solve their problems. And so I think the third thing I was thinking is that what's interesting these days is that a large customer will typically not phone up Esri and say, send us 45 GISs, right? The customer would say, we have a problem, or we have an issue, or we would like to improve our logistics or something like that. And so they talk with our engineers and with our consultants to try to find an overall solution. And that might include software from other companies, some open source stuff, some machine learning capabilities, connecting to sensors in real time. So all kinds of interesting integrations with the GIS platform. And so that's really interesting for us, because we need to together figure out what's just the right mix for this customer. And some of these customers are spending a lot of money, but they're expecting to get a return on their investment, right? They're not just throwing money into the project and walking away. They're investing money, but then they want to get that back in the form of increased efficiency and to be able to save money over time. So for us, you know, the GIS world is getting more and more interesting, because there's more of a diversity of these different organizations that we work with. And so Pauline is right, as we say, on the sort of the pointy end of the spear, right? Working directly to provide these people with demonstrations and be able to help them to solve their problems. And that's really interesting. Speaking of some of those solutions, here we have a web application, right? So this is a web application that one of our engineers created in JavaScript, so utilizing our API for JavaScript, and they created a website. And this is a specific website to allow non-expert users to be able to ask simple questions, in this case about drought or about extreme heat, and to get, you know, some immediate feedback from the system. So we're seeing that what this engineer did was to take the base map of the US and to connect to NOAA, which is our National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, to get weather data, in this case, heat data. They're connecting to the US Census Bureau to get access to population data, so we know who lives in each one of these counties. And then they're connecting to the US Department of Agriculture to get access to agricultural productivity data. And so this is a semi-real-time map showing us the state of the drought and severe drought in the US. So if I click on any particular point on this map, it will tell me, okay, I've clicked on Eddy County, New Mexico. I've clicked on a particular geography, and then it zooms into that particular geography, and then it hits the different three databases and tells me a story about what's going on there. So it tells me here in the middle of this little dashboard that this particular county is in extreme drought conditions. It has almost 58,000 people living there. It's been 133 days in this extreme drought condition. And then further on the right here, it says that there are 766 agricultural jobs that are affected. for a total of $98 million. And then it breaks things down and tells us how much of that is hay, livestock, wheat, corn, soy, etc. So this is a sort of a typical GIS application these days. And Pauline and her colleagues would, in many cases, build this kind of an application where the customer would say, we don't want to become experts in GIS. We don't want a big, fully functional GIS, but we want our employees or our workers to be able to go into a web map and ask simple questions and get simple answers. Normally, do we have the data here from the 18th, so just last week, but I can also go back here on the timeline and I can ask for that same county, what was the situation back in 2004? So I can click on that and it will redraw the data from back in 2004. So I can have a look at any particular time period and I can create windows to say, I only want to analyze the 2010s, or all I want to analyze 2019, or all I want to analyze the month of October. So they're going and they're touching these databases and creating on the fly these particular web representations. And again, this kind of an application is what we would expect you graduates to be creating in the future. Not providing people necessarily with a fully functional GIS, but providing people with a collection of these apps. And a particular organization would say, we need an app on flooding, we need an app on transportation, we need an app on population, we need an app on migration. And so it's really interesting to be able to find the right source databases and put them together in the form of these easily utilized applications, and then publish them to an organization or to the whole world. And so I think we're starting to see a proliferation of more thousands and thousands of these smaller apps. And this is kind of a nice modern view of GIS. And so you need to have a diversity of skills. You need to know about databases and where the data sources are and how to kind of clean and fix the data, and a little bit of maybe some data science skills, a little bit of programming skills to be able to put this application together, etc. And it's a nice sort of combination of skills that allows you to create this kind of application for any particular customer who would come along. Hopefully you're aware of story maps. And so story maps have become a really interesting way for us to tell a sort of a scientific or technical story to people who are not necessarily experts. So if we want to try to convince our city mayor that we need to plant more trees in our city, throwing a bunch of scientific data at the mayor is probably not going to be the best way for us to convince this person. But if we can put a story together, and this is just an example, this is not exactly the tree example for your city, but if we can put together a sort of interactive presentation talking about planting trees in the city and about the problem and the context, the spatial context in which we're working, and maybe we did a tree inventory. And again, this is just an example. But the story maps allow us to combine multimedia presentations as though it were a PowerPoint presentation with live map data, to be able to go into the live map data and to be able to query the data, to be able to ask questions about the data, to be able to have some interactivity. In theory, we can take some of those applications that I just showed, like for the drought or for flooding, and we can embed those applications within our story map. So we can have a story map which has GIS applications within them, and people can actually start moving around and asking some special questions within the story map. This has become very, very convincing, a very compelling way of telling our story. And it's fairly easy for us to create, and then we can publish it, of course, for the whole world, and people can come back and they can utilize it later, and they can tell the story themselves later on. This is actually a very nice project for a university, maybe for your own, which is to create a tree inventory or some other kind of inventory on campus, to go around with mobile devices and collect an inventory of tree species or graffiti or any particular kind of element within your world which you'd like to represent, and to create a campus map, and then to combine that with the story mapping capabilities to tell a story, maybe give a tour of your campus, maybe talk about transportation, any particular theme that you're interested in. I can tell you that when story maps first came out more than 10 years ago, many of the GIS experts said, oh, that's not really GIS, it's just multimedia, whatever. Well, everyone has taken to it. It's become such a popular application. It's probably our most popular application. And Esri has more than 100 different products these days because of the power of storytelling. Because telling the story in a way which everyone can understand and then adding the spatial context really is, it has been proven time and time again to be able to effect change. We've been doing a lot of work with extreme heat lately. And so I know extreme heat is of interest in India as it is in many countries. We have a MOOC, a massive online open course that talks about different climate actions. And one of the climate actions is creating a heat map of your city. So we show people how to create a simple heat map of their city. And these two students from Athens, Greece, decided that they were going to repeat that exercise and utilize their own methodology and their own data sources. So they're telling the story in the form of a story map about the heat island effect and how planting trees can help and how industry is causing this heat island effect, et cetera, et cetera. Then they go into their own country and they talk about their study area and they talk about the data that's been collected. And then at some point here, they talk about how they use satellite imagery to be able to zoom in. Oh, first they utilize satellite imagery to look at tree canopy cover. So they know where the trees are within their city. And here we're zooming in and we've got a particular imagery, which is coming from Maxar, but we've also got the tree cover overlaid on that. And then we've got the heat surface temperature, which are taking from a Landsat image. And then finally, they've got some population data. So they're showing the people who are affected, not just raw numbers, but who are the vulnerable people who are affected. Where do the retired people live? Or where do the families with young children? Or where are the families that don't have easy access to transportation? And so they create a population density map, and then they put all those factors together and they create a map of, and here's the workflow, typical GIS workflow, and they create an index of exposure to extreme heat. And of course, they're telling the story and showing the results utilizing a story map. So we would expect and we would hope that you all are now starting to experiment with story maps. You can use a story map to tell your own story. You can take your curriculum vitae, which perhaps is in a PDF document, and you can put it on the map. Here's where I'm from, here's where I went to study, here's where I did my internship, here's where I worked for an NGO, here's where I have my first employment, and you can create a nice story map of just telling your own story. Here's another similar one that was created by a group called Youth Mappers, who are volunteers around the world at universities who are adding data to the OpenStreetMap platform, and now they're starting to work with us to do some heat mapping. So they did some training in Bangkok last week, and they did a kind of a quick and dirty story map, not bad for a couple of days' work. So they had people from Bangladesh and from Philippines and from Nepal and Sri Lanka and lots of different people in that particular group. So they're telling the extreme heat story. And so story maps has become a really, really interesting way for you to tell your scientific story or your career story. Let me try to stop sharing there for a minute. Do we have questions? Is there something else people would like us to mention or to dive into? I'm not monitoring that. In fact, I can't
Am I
see the
audible?
window any longer. I've lost that window. So if there are any questions,
Yeah, there are a few questions. I think the first one to unmute was Soham.
Yeah, so first question is in the chat box from Aniket Mitra.
Okay.
He's asking,
Mhm.
how can we best equip the current GIS workforce with the skills needed to keep pace with the field's rapid technological advancements?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's an interesting one for us because, of course, just like with any career, we can't just learn things once when we're 20 years old and then, just move on and work for 50 years without refreshing ourselves, right? We need to be retrained all the time. And, we within Esri, we're always retraining ourselves And as I mentioned, now that we're integrating with more and more different fields of interest, suddenly we have to learn about digital twins and BIM models and all this other stuff, right? So there are constant opportunities and needs for us to be retrained. One of the things Esri does is that we have a whole series of training opportunities. And so one of the interesting training opportunities are Learn tutorials. So learnarcgis.com. This is a collection of multilingual tutorials on all sorts of different topics. And so we encourage our current users, and we use this as professors also. We have our students go in and use these as well. This is a series of small half an hour, 1 hour tutorials on all sorts of different topics. And they're self-contained. And so you have access to the sort of the instructions, to the data, and hopefully you've got access to the software already at your university. And so I can filter through here and say, I want to look at tutorials that have to do with 3D analytics, for example, and it shows me the ones that are about 3D. Or I'm looking for something which is about a particular topic, so health and human services, etc. And of course, when I filter too much, then I don't have too many. But anyway, there are more than 200 different online learning options here. And so we certainly encourage people to go in and take these tutorials, figure out what kind of thing they would like to test. And this is a great way to test the technology and to test some of the new tools, is using the Learn lesson. So that's one of the ways that we do that. Was there another question there?
Second question is from Kunal Tanwar. What specific GIS skills are most valued by employers in the AEC industry, and how can students like us acquire these skills during their academic training?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, the wider question is sort of, how can I get experience? Because everyone wants experience, right? Everyone starts at zero. But we need to remember that, you know, as a student, you're actually not starting from zero, right? You're starting from hopefully some practical projects that you've done during your studies. And so that's how we start the curriculum vitae, right? That's how you start your experience. You talk about some concrete, specific projects you've worked on while studying. Normally at the master's degree level, you have more time, more hours available to build something a little bit more credible. And so oftentimes at the master's degree level is when you have, you know, maybe some kind of a final project, a capstone or something like that, and you can dedicate 50, 100 hours to building something. And then that something that you build, increasingly now, you can put online and show everyone, right? So it's not just something that gets put on paper and hidden away. Now you can build an app, you can build something on the web, and then you can publish it, and then you can point to it later on. 2 years later, you can show people, here's something I built when I was studying at some particular university, right? And then something which Pauline mentioned, but many of us didn't start working at Esri or at a GIS company straight out of the university, right? We started doing something else. And we got a little bit of experience here and a little bit of experience there. And then we went to work for the GIS company after 5, 10, 20 years in some cases of experience. And so it's not necessarily the case that you need to follow any particular path. There are lots of different paths, and you'll have opportunities that just sort of appear. And then you have to decide, I'm going to go for it or I'm going to let it pass, right? And before you know it, you're doing something that you never imagined you'd be doing. And so in the case of AEC, it's something it's growing. It's a very interesting field to be in. You might get lucky and find some kind of a project which is hiring interns. You might be able to have some contact with an engineering department or an architecture department within the university that's also starting to get involved in that kind of a project. And you can maybe get involved in a project which is already underway. The Learn lessons or the Learn tutorials that I just showed, they have some AEC examples, so you can kind of start getting your feet wet with those examples. So those are just some ideas. Pauline might have some others.
Yes, and I think as I share that, I'll also just touch on the things that I thought would complement some of the things that Mike has already mentioned. So I'll just share my screen for that. So ideally, you know, sometimes the question is, how do you acquire the skills? But beyond that question, there's the aspect of how do you demonstrate or showcase that you have the skills. And I like how Mike has shared that sometimes you could have built something probably 2 or 3 years ago, but how do you make sure it's still accessible and you have provided it in a way that someone could see that you have demonstrated experience in terms of being able to identify a challenge, being able to build a solution and share it out in a format that will be usable and so on. So going back to one of the tools that Mike had mentioned, story maps, this is a very useful tool for some of you to be able to put together a portfolio of some of the work that you've done. So you'll find that during your program, your master's program, there are kind of like assignments you might get, practicals, but you also have your thesis or your project for your program. So other than obviously being able to work on it and presenting it and publishing a paper, sometimes if you have built something that could be interactive and useful and even helpful based on the kind of solution you've put together, you can showcase this using a story map. So here I have examples of people who had put together their CVs or their resumes using story maps, whereby they have different sections, just highlighting some of the things they've done just based on broad categories. And the good thing about this, we are leveraging ideally a tool built for GIS to showcase some of this work and so on. One of the examples that have been there for a while is this one by Leile, and one of her projects she did on 3D modeling. It's something that she has available as part of her portfolio on her story map. So other than having this as something that's available, like showing like I can use a tool designed for mapping to be a bit creative and showcase my work, they also have a way they've documented their work, gladly hosted by Esri, to be able to do this. And you can use a public account. So we have public accounts tied to our overall portal, Access Online, that you can create and you can use to have some of your work showcased there. So as I mentioned, it's not only about acquiring skills, but demonstrating that you have the skills over time. The other thing I'd like to suggest is joining professional communities. So you'll find that thankfully, as part of one of the leading institutions in India, your institution, you have access to some professional communities within your country and beyond. But also through platforms like LinkedIn, you have access to even more communities. So you can see, like, for example, just an immediate search, I have over 2.5 million groups existing. So the question is, how can you leverage this already available platform to first access a community and be able to actively engage in it? So having skills, having knowledge is important, but also interacting with peers and other professionals and playing a role in that goes an extra step to help you access opportunities. So I'll find in some cases, not every organization is immediately looking for a GIS person, but they are looking for someone who needs to have a significant amount of GIS skills to be able to support some of the work they're doing in their organization. So some of those things are advertised, but most of them you'll actually come to learn from them. You'll actually come to learn of those opportunities within some of these groups. So this is just like, I just searched groups basically, but I'm sure if you filter and go through and comb through some of them, you'll be able to see some of these things. One example I usually have in context of what I've seen where I come from, Kenya, is back in the local Esri office in Kenya, there's someone who was working in the marketing department, but he started a whole community on marketing, just bringing together people who are involved in marketing. And through that, he was able to also put in aspects of how does location or how can GIS have an impact on marketing. And now this is something of consideration by many organizations that have a marketing department, trying to see how can we leverage GIS to be able to address concerns such as where do we place a particular facility, how do we make sure we reach our target audience based on branding, based on putting up billboards and so on. So that's just one of the ways that something was brought in through our forum. And for you, you can try and see, based on your interests, your passions, what can you bring in based on existing communities, and how can you contribute to that as you build your portfolio and also showcase your skills and be able to access an opportunity based on that. With communities also, you have access to other peers also through your program. So I would recommend peer mentoring. So the traditional format of mentorship is as someone who's starting their career or early on, you would look for someone who's a bit, who has more experience to mentor you. But sometimes you can look at the option of peer mentorship. So look at other people doing their master's degrees and see if any of them is interested in learning a bit about GIS. So how can you leverage like your current framework to be able to help others build capacity? And you also learn from them in turn and see how can you contribute or grow based on the knowledge you have, the knowledge they have, and so on. So this is a model that's actually growing with time, and it's something that you can try and do. Because I remember talking to Asmita, she told me like she does placement for, I think, masters in GIS. Then there was also someone doing placement for MTech and so on. So how do you also, look at other people in other industries and see how can you engage and learn from each other and so on. The other one is becoming a top voice. So it's not necessarily LinkedIn, but there are so many ways that you can become a voice of your generation or a voice of your industry. So one of the quickest ways to do this is LinkedIn Top Voice by contributing to posts, because they'll normally ask you like, oh, what is your opinion on this? And you can contribute on that. You can do like posting regularly, commenting on other people's posts based on what you're interested in. Reach out to other professionals there and try and understand how did they start on in their career and how can you leverage some of their networks, for example, to be able to progress in that. You can make your own, I think also called blog posts on LinkedIn, just sharing your perspective. So you'll notice that the more you do this, the more you also improve your way of framing some of these things. One, your views on some of these aspects, and also it puts you out there. It gives you visibility that you might need. Also, when looking at voices of the generation, we have an example. This is a group that we met with Mike a few months ago. It's a group from Berkeley University. They're called Sustainable and Just Future. So it's a group of students who've come together and they're just helping their peers to learn more about climate. And it's something that's given them recognition. It's given them a platform, which, sometimes you want the one thing that's going to make you stand out or give you visibility and leverage that. So it's just looking around you and seeing how can I take advantage of what I have to be able to do all of these things and so on. My final comment is, just as Mike had mentioned, we have a lot of resources on our Learn portal. And in addition to that, it's good to keep on adding to your knowledge. We do it all the time. Trust me, all the time as a professional, we get to do it as part of our work. But also you can do some of that. So other than what you have from your academic side, sometimes you can add certifications, you can add things like what you have with our MOOCs, that some of them are a bit specific in terms of like the example you're giving on AEC or even climate action. So these provide a really good way of combining different capabilities enabled by GIS, where you get to test out a few things, understand the concepts behind some things, how the approach you can take in trying to solve some of the common problems in the world. So we have MOOCs with Esri, but there are also so many other platforms out there that you can take advantage of, do a short course and get certified, or get something to show that other than the skills that you've acquired from your program, you have additional skills or additional knowledge that could be leveraged to help you achieve some of these things. And yeah, maybe also, Mike, there's something else I might have missed or you'd like to chime in on.
Yeah, I've been trying to answer some of the questions here briefly in text. People were asking about data. So one of the things I did not show, but I'll have a look at now is, share my screen again. So are you seeing the Living Atlas? Or did I choose? Yeah, okay. So the Living Atlas of the World is probably the world's largest collection of curated geographic information. And so what's happening now for a lot of GIS users is that they're no longer starting from zero. They're starting from some interesting base layers. And not just a single base map, but other kinds of global data layers on top of the base map. And so the Living Atlas of the World provides global access to imagery, to soils, to land cover, to all sorts of interesting variables. So just to give one example, someone was asking about extreme heat. This is a big topic these days, as we're seeing in the news. And so if we want to have a look at heat, we can use Landsat Level 2 data, which is made immediately available here within the Living Atlas. So I can immediately bring that up within my map viewer or within my ArcGIS Pro, and I've got access to a really interesting data layer here. And so I can zoom into my particular area of interest. And then I can go through here and I can choose a processing template. And the server, the ArcGIS server, is already doing the sort of the heavy lifting for us. So it's doing the classification of, let's say, surface temperature. And this allows me to kind of zoom into a particular pixel. These are 30-meter Landsat pixels of pretty much any spot on Earth. And I can go through here and I can change the properties. And I can change the transparency. And I can see what's underneath there. And I can change the base map layer and say I would like to overlay that heat imagery on OpenStreetMap or something like that, right? So on top of OpenStreetMap, I can then play around with the transparency and I can look at 30-meter pixels. And this is Landsat data, which has been collected back to the year 1982. So I can go back in lots of different time periods and I can be able to click on a particular pixel and I can get a lot of information directly out of that particular Landsat image. Well, similarly, I can go through and I can say I'm looking for land cover. And here's a land cover layer, which comes from the European Space Agency. It's also global. So I can have a look at that. I can add that as an additional layer to my GIS analysis. And I can combine that with my heat information. So let's go to Pune, which I visited, by the way. I was there about 3 years ago, and I actually have some family there. So here's some land cover information. And so here there's tree cover, and there's urban, and there's various other kinds of vegetation. And again, I can play with transparency and I can have a look and see how it matches with, let's say, some imagery of my city. And I can see that the classification is not perfect, but it's not bad. And the nice thing is that it's global, right? So we've got many of these global layers that are available to you in a format, which is what we call analysis ready data, ARD. So someone's already done some of the corrections, some of the cleanup, and they've made it publicly available on ArcGIS Online. So this is a game changer, right? This is a totally different way of working. Whereas previously we started from zero. Where are we going to get the tree cover from? We have to fly drones around our city. It'll take us 5 months to collect the tree cover. right? Now you have access to global tree cover. Is it perfect? No, but it's global. So I can compare Pune to 5 other cities around the world utilizing the same global data. And I can do the same with the surface level, level temperature. I can do the same with population data. I can do the same with soils. And the list of the data layers just goes on and on and on. So, I mean, this Living Atlas data store is just fantastic. And there's all kinds of different categories here: boundaries, people, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So, as I said, it's a game changer, and the way in which we create GIS applications these days is almost never starting from zero. It's almost always sort of borrowing from other applications and sort of copying and pasting parts of applications, data sources, functionality, and within a day, we've got something credible up and running, and our users can have a look at it and say, no, it should be better, faster, more red, more blue, whatever, right? And we can iterate very quickly through the application, and within a question of maybe weeks rather than years, we've got some very credible GIS applications up and running for people. Someone was asking here about heat wave crises and water crises and that sort of thing. And I replied, you know, it's kind of sad but true. But in cases of crisis, actually the GIS industry benefits, right? So we benefit, unfortunately, from wars and from flooding and from forest fires, from COVID. Our company grew a lot during COVID because suddenly all the public health organizations wanted to have COVID maps and COVID dashboards and tell their story with story maps. So we actually, you know, we had a big business. Everyone was home, you know, we were all working from home offices, and we were servicing these public health organizations, and our company grew. So that's the way it is, right? You know, we hope that these crises will you know, decrease and eventually go away, but you know, there's always something going on in the world, and GIS is nearly always ready to go to help people to remediate these problems. And so it's very exciting for us as well. I see that Pauline has added a whole bunch of links, which is nice. We can share the other links here that we're showing. We decided not to show just a simple PowerPoint, but to show you bits and pieces on the web, and you can go and you can find some of these things yourself as well, if you're a creative web searcher. Question from Kareem about cross-functional learning, skill enhancement, research. Ooh, wow. Across different teams in Esri. Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. Each company has its own particular culture and structure and that sort of thing. Our company is not very structured in the sense that we don't have a very clear organizational chart. It's not super clear exactly who Pauline works for and works with. You know, she gets involved with it, whatever's necessary, right? And you know, and if we can, you know, if we can get Pauline's time to work on a cool project in Africa, we do that. And if she needs me to jump in and help with some university stuff, then she contacts me and we kind of figure things out. So our company is maybe a little bit unique in the sense that it's kind of a social network and we make things work. We have always lots of good people available, but we don't always know exactly who's available when for what project, right?
Yeah.
How we do it. And so there's a lot of cross-team learning from each other, and many teams are creating learning materials. We don't just have one learning material creation team. You know, many of our teams are creating blog posts and tutorials and courses and doing trainings. And so there's a lot of that happening as well.
Yeah. And just to add to that, it could be regional, as Mike has mentioned, if people are working in a particular region. So there are some who are domiciled there or work from there. It could be industry-based, based on the kind of industry that we are supporting. I think we keep on mentioning AEC a lot. So we have more industries that we work with, basically, or we enable as per the link we shared on the industry solutions. So it could be industry-based, maybe looking at local government or national government solutions and so on. It could be product-based. So if there's more competence or focus on a particular product or particular capability being enabled, you'll find that different people are being pulled in from different places, different teams to be able to support that. And that's one of the amazing things about the dynamism that's enabled within Esri, that you get to work with people from everywhere, people who probably you would not have come across, basically. And it's also a model being taken up by so many tech companies or so many technology or data companies and so on. That dynamism in being able to leverage interests, passion you have, skills you have, your location, just all of that to try and come up with useful products. Yeah.
Mhm. There was another good question earlier regarding specific technical skills and tools. So, that's been a common question over the years, and the answer is almost always programming. But now things are changing a little bit, right? Because now with the advent of generative AI, we see that a lot of programmers are not exactly doing the programming themselves. They need to know how to control the AI to help them to create the programs and to test the programs and that sort of thing. So it may be that in 5 or 10 years, being a crack programmer is not the necessity. Maybe maybe the need will be to control the AI that does the programming. But in any cases, we need to keep up with what's happening regarding coding and the role of AI in coding. So that's going to be something for you all to keep an eye on. In general, in the tech industry, people who say, oh, I use the technology, but I'm not a programmer, are going to have difficulties. I think people are going to need to be able to have a little bit of programming skills, among other things, to do this integration that we talked about, right? So I think people who are able to show integrations are going to have an advantage over people who say, I use the software, right? Using the software is going to be sort of necessary, but not sufficient. It's going to be the people who say, I can use the software, but also I connected R to it, or I connected some Python something to it, or I connected it to sensors, or I connected it to BIM, or I connected it to something else. I think those people are going to have an advantage in the future. So maybe the final question, we're kind of running low on time here. Someone asked about how can students balance the theoretical and practical aspects of the geoinformatics education. Yeah, I mean, we need to learn the basics, right? We all need to learn the basics. We can't just jump in to start typing on day one. And we need to keep up with the basics, right? Because some of these theoretical topics will come and go. And so we need to know about the theory of AI, not just how to push the buttons on AI, right? So yeah, there's a bit of a balance. So we need to read the articles and we need to, watch the webinars and hear the stories to know the context of these different technologies, what exactly they are and what are they not, and what can they be applied to. And we don't want to be, for example, using AI for everything just because it's the cool new shiny object, right? That's something which we caution our students to be a little bit careful of. AI, machine learning, that sort of thing can be very interesting, but it's not always necessary. So we need to be able to weigh very carefully the relative role or the benefit of AI for some of our studies. So I think there'll always be a need for both, maintaining our theoretical knowledge and also practical skills. Question is as we are product-driven business or customer-driven business? I think both, but if we have to choose one, I would think that our boss, Jack Dangerman, would say clearly customer-driven, right? And so we've been around long enough that, for example, if some new shiny technology appears on the scene, we don't need to feel like we jump into it on day one. We can kind of sit back and we can wait for our customers to sort of decide for themselves when do they want to have access to this new technology. And when we see a critical mass of real customers with real problems who need this technology to solve their problems, then we'll jump in and we'll build it, or we'll acquire a company that already, has that technology up and running, and then we'll jump into that industry or into that technology. So that's the way that we work. Not the same as a startup company. A startup company might want to have the first something and be pioneers. That's different, and that's fine. It's of course very risky. So maybe you'll become a billionaire, or maybe it will just flop. Our company is more of a stable company where we have this kind of constant flow of customers coming to us with real problems and real issues, and so that's comforting for us that we know that we're not going to really be wasting our time in any of these cases, right? We always know that these are sort of real projects that are going to be put into place and serve the needs of real people. Pauline has included another link there about the company, right? Which is, as we said, it's kind of a special company.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's been more than an hour, and I'm sure maybe there are some other lingering questions out there. Both Pauline and I can be available for contact later on. So I guess if there are other questions, you can feed them through your various professors or other official channel and get those to us, and we'd be happy to answer later on. You can find us on LinkedIn and other places as well, so you can contact us that way. Any final questions or comments? Hopefully that's been valuable for you. And of course, you know, this is our particular perspectives on that. So if you talk to two other Ezra people, you might get a slightly different story, but pretty close.
Hello, sir. So we come to the end of the webinar. Good evening to all present here. I am Ashmita Banerjee, and as we draw this enlightening webinar to a close, it is my esteemed privilege to deliver the vote of thanks. On behalf of Symbiosis Institute of Geoinformatics, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to everyone who contributed to the success of this event. First and foremost, I wish to thank to our esteemed guest speakers, Ms. Pauline Okeyo and Dr. Gould, for sharing their valuable insights and expertise. Your extensive experience in this field of geoinformatics has provided us with a deeper understanding of the transition from academia to industry, preparing the next generation of geoinformatics professionals. Your dedication and passion for this field are truly inspiring, and we are profoundly grateful for the time and effort you have invested in preparing this session. I would also extend our heartfelt thanks to our esteemed director, Dr. T.P. Singh, and Dr. Vidya Patkar ma'am, who is our deputy director, for their unwavering support and encouragement in organizing this event. Additionally, I wish to acknowledge the diligent efforts of our placement officer, Mrs. Bhakti Kite ma'am. Special thanks to our webinar committee and the technical and IT department for the meticulous planning and execution, whose hard work behind the scenes ensured the smooth execution of this webinar and a successful experience for all the participants. I would also like to extend my gratitude to all the participants for their enthusiastic engagement and insightful questions. Your active participation and engagement have greatly enhanced the quality of our interaction, discussion, and added depth to the topic. Once again, I sincerely thank Ms. Pauline Okeyo and Dr. Michael Gould for their expertise and all the participants for making this webinar a resounding success. Your presence and involvement has made a significant impact, and we look forward to future engagements with you all. Finally, I thank Symbiosis Institute of Geoinformatics for providing the platform and support necessary to conduct this webinar. Your continuous encouragement and resources are indispensable. In conclusion, I hope the knowledge and perspectives gained today will inspire further discussion and innovation and collaboration. Thank you once again to everyone for making this webinar a memorable and impactful event. Best wishes to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, everyone.